Here we're going to start on Daf Chaval. It's 21a. We start. It's a little over. It's a little above the halfway mark. Surya Maskirin Batir. Thank Hashem that you're from Torah every day. Learning also for my father and for Naftali ben Bela. Right. Okay. We had a machlekes in the Mishnah between Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yose. Meir was one level stricter than Rebbe Yose about renting houses and about renting fields. And Rebbe Yose was one step down. Whatever Rebbe Meir forbade, Rebbe Yose would allow that just one level of that. So, for example, Rebbe Meir held that you're not allowed to rent houses in Eretz Yisrael. And Rebbe Yose holds in Eretz Yisrael you are allowed to rent houses. Both hold you can't sell. Then when it came to the fields, so Rebbe Yose says you can't rent it. And Meir held, of course you can't rent. And then in Syria, there was a machlekes like this, where Rebbe Meir held that you're allowed to rent houses, but not fields. And Rebbe Yose held that you're allowed to sell houses. Yeah. But you're only allowed to rent fields, you can't sell fields. According to Rebbe Meir, you can't even rent fields. Yes, you can rent fields. Okay, well, anyway, let's take a look at this. Surya Maskirin Batim. Meir says that in Syria, you're allowed to rent houses, but not fields. The Gemara asks, he already explained in the Gemara before, why are we restricted by fields? Because there's one other halacha that applies, and that is that there's one issue that you're not allowed to give them a dwelling place in the land. The second issue is that you don't want to remove remove the laws of maaser from them, right? So the field had that extra halacha in Syria. Now in Syria, Mishnah Mechira Delay. Why are you not allowed to sell the houses? Mishum Mechir Eretz Yisrael. It's Zara. In Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to give them a place to live. So in Syria, which is very close to Eretz Yisrael, we don't sell either. Okay. Yahachi, that's the case. So what's the halacha about renting a house in Eretz Yisrael? You're not allowed to. Rebbe Meir holds. So why does he hold you allowed to rent in Syria? If there's a gzeira, what you're not allowed to do in Eretz Yisrael applies to Syria, so the same thing should apply to the renting. Gemara answers. The problem with renting is only a gzeira because of selling. So if in Israel it's only prohibited because of a rabbinic enactment, so I'm not going to make a rabbinic enactment in Syria because to protect the rabbinic enactment of Eretz Yisrael, right? You don't make a gzeira on a gzeira. It gets weaker, right? You make one gzeira, you don't make a gzeira to protect the gzeira. But Schira said the Besuria the Gzeira because in 1 second. What about renting the fields which Rebbe Meir prohibits? He prohibits renting fields in Syria. 1 second. But renting is only a Gzeira because of selling. In Syria is only a Gzeira because of Eretz Yisrael. So it's a Gzeira. Says Hassam, the Gemara answers Lav Gzeira. Syria is actually not a gzeira. We changed our whole shot over here. We can say like this: Kasavar, because Rebbe Meir holds kibush yachid shmei kibush. What was Syria? Syria was the land that was conquered by David HaMelech, and it wasn't considered. It was a machlekes if it's considered Eretz Yisrael because it's kibush yachid. It means that the land of Israel could be extended, but only after all of Eretz Yisrael is conquered. If before all of Eretz Yisrael is conquered, they go out and they conquer other lands, that does not get incorporated into Eretz Yisrael. They need every part of Eretz Yisrael and then other lands, but not in the meantime. So there's a machlekes if Syria is considered Eretz Yisrael. This opinion holds Syria as Eretz Yisrael. So take a look at this. The field that has two issues. The Rabbanan made Zara, that you're not allowed to sell the field or rent the field. The sell would be the daraisa. Renting is the Zara. Batim, das butarti. But houses that don't have the two issues, like Gozru, Bahu, Rabbanan, the Rabbanan did not even make one Gezerah. Didn't make any Gezerah at all. They held that you're allowed to rent. So now the question is, if Syria is the same as Eretz Yisrael, then why is there a difference when it comes to renting houses?
According to
Rebbe Meir. Yeah, the problem?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it's good. We have questions. I just would like that someone else asked it, and then I would be sure that we got the pshat. But there's a question here. Okay. Let's see anything. Yeah. Do they have an interpretation there? They explain the difference in Syria and Eretz Yisrael. Okay.
No. This year they say that rabbis they renting in Israel because of concern of selling.
Right.
But in Syria they say that it's allowed.
Right.
So
The reason why they say
they don't
renting
have
is
that
that,
concern.
yeah, the reason why in Syria they said it's allowed is that they didn't make a gzera in Syria because they only made the gzera when you have two issues, not when there's only one issue.
What did you see that Kasavar? So in other words, its essence was partially different.
Uh-huh.
So it's not because it's just this is what it was.
It must be that even though kibush yachid shmei kibush still is a different level. That's how we're going to have to explain this.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. No. The Gemara answers the question. The Gemara switched the pshat. The Gemara thought originally that the reason why you're not allowed to sell houses in Syria was a gzera because of Eretz Yisrael, and so therefore, no, the reason why you're not allowed to sell houses is a gzera because of Eretz Yisrael, but renting houses was acceptable. Renting. So we said, why can't you rent? We said, because renting is what we thought originally. Renting was a gzera because of selling, and Syria is a gzera because of Eretz Yisrael, so it's two steps removed. When I answered no, Syria has its own prohibition. Kibush Yachid, it's considered Eretz Yisrael, and you're not allowed to rent. You're not allowed to sell because you're not allowed to sell. That's the halacha. What about renting? It says, well, they didn't make a gzera on renting. So by fields they made a gzera. They said, yeah, because fields have a double problem. So they made a gzera. They only make gzeras when there's double problems, not when there's only one problem. So the question is, so if it's Eretz Yisrael, why didn't they do the same in Eretz Yisrael and only make the gzera when there's a double problem? They didn't. They made the gzera even when there's one problem in Eretz Yisrael. It's serious like Eretz Yisrael. Well, so apparently it's still different. Okay, b'chutz la'aretz chulu. In chutz la'aretz, the laws drop down one step, and you're allowed to even sell houses, but you're not allowed to sell fields. So the dispute tarti goes b'rabanan. If there's two issues, like we said by the fields, that first of all give them a dwelling place in Eretz Yisrael, and there's a gzera. And the second issue is by fields, is that you remove it from the laws of maaser if it's owned by a non-Jew. So they said you're not allowed to sell the field. Batim bless butarti, when it comes to houses, that you don't have two issues, like those of Barabanan, they didn't make any gzera at all, and you're allowed to sell houses to a non-Jew in Chutz La'aretz. Yeah, that's how we have a real estate market in the Jewish. Rebbe Yose says, "Eretz Yisrael maskin lembatim." Rebbe Yose argues, and he says in Eretz Yisrael you're even allowed to rent houses in Eretz Yisrael. Apparently, he doesn't have that kazera. My time, what's the reason? Why fields not and houses yes? So this disputate goes to Rabbanan. When it comes to fields, where there's two prohibitions, the Rabbanan made a kazera that you're not allowed to even rent it. Batim less lutarti. When it comes to houses, like those Rabbanan, the Rabbanan said you're not allowed to sell, but you're still allowed to rent. Basuria Meichen. In Syria, you're even allowed to sell houses. You're not allowed to sell fields, but you're allowed to sell houses. You can only rent fields in Syria. This is the opinion of Rebbe Yose, who argues on Rebbe Meir. According to Rebbe Meir, you weren't allowed to sell houses in Syria. According to Rebbe Yose, you are allowed to sell houses. My time, what's the reason for Rebbe Yose? Because he holds Syria is not considered the land of Israel, because it was only conquered by an individual, which that's the status of this land. So the dispute goes Rabbanan by the fields where there's two prohibitions. The Rabbanan made a decree on Syria, and they said you're not allowed to sell. Last time we were talking about renting. You're not allowed to, according to Rebbe Yose, you're not allowed to sell by the field. But bottom less butarti, but houses where you don't have the two issues, like those Rabbanan, and they said that you're even allowed to sell. You're allowed to sell houses and fields. My time, what's the reason? Even the merchak like since it's far away from Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to make a decree that if you're allowed to give them here, then you may give them there. So far away, it's a different story. Yehuda says in the name of his teacher Shmuel, the Allah is like Rebbe Yose. Now, okay. Whenever there's a machlekes Rebbe Yose and Rebbe Meir, the Allah is like Rebbe Yose. So usually the Gemara asks, why do you have to tell this to me? Allah is like Rebbe Yose. I know the Allah is like Rebbe Yose. Though Allah is always like Rebbe Yose. But here the Allah is like Rebbe Yose. That's the general rule. So we're going to see shortly that there's this Mishnah is going to be a machlekes v'achakastam. It's machlekes Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yose. And in the Mishnah itself, we're going to show that Rebbe Meir is the main opinion. So this has a contradiction in rules. On one hand, Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Yose, on the other hand, on machlekes v'achakastam, you always follow the stam. So which would mean that the halach is like Rebbe Meir. And so comes along Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol and says the halach is like Rebbe Yose. That's how we rule when we have this in this instance. Okay. The general rules don't apply because there's a contradiction there. It could be a superiority to one over the other, but in this instance, we're passing like. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef. Yosef says, "Well, even though you're allowed to sell houses in Chutz La'aretz, but don't give them the neighborhood. Can't give them a neighborhood, right?" What did Rebbe Meir hold about Chutz La'aretz? Rebbe Meir also said you're allowed to sell houses. But well, whoever the case is, wherever we're going, you can't give them a neighborhood. Kama shchuna, how much is a neighborhood? Tana, starting the Bais vein shchuna plus mishleisha neyadam. A neighborhood is 3 people. You can't sell 3 non-Jews houses. Okay, so the Gemara asks, maybe what's going to happen is like this. He's going to sell a big property to the non-Jew. The non-Jew is going to divide it up. You ever see these houses? We came in once when we were looking at the house. It was owned by a different segment of our community. And I came inside, there were a lot of families in that house. Every bedroom was like another family. The beds, like piled, you can walk through it. It's hard to see the house, because you want to buy a house, everything's going to be removed, but it's hard to see through all of that. Anyway, so maybe he's going to sell it to 2 more people, and sub whatever, and then you're going to have a shchuna there. So it's all because of you. You sold it to one. He brings. Abaya says, "Alifnei mafaktinan, alifnei delifnei lemafaktin." He says when it comes to these laws, we only have a prohibition just to do the direct prohibition, not that the next one is going to violate in this. You don't have to be concerned about that. Just like by lifnei iver, we are. There's only a prohibition to give it directly to the person that would be stumbling. But to give it to someone that's going to end up giving it to someone else that's going to be a stumbling, that wouldn't be the problem, right? Yeah? What's wrong?
Stumbling is like the person is not aware. But it's referring to the person you're making the sale.
No. First, there's 2 issues here. One is that there's 2 ways of learning this Gemara when we say lifnei iver. We're calling it lifnei iver. First of all, lifnei iver is the person could be aware. You're not allowed to give wine to Nazir from the other side of the river, when he can't get it on his own. He's aware of what he's doing, and you're aware of what he's doing, and you're passing it over the river. It's considered lifnei iver because you're supplying him something that he's going to violate. It's still considered lifnei iver. Now here, right?
Isn't it okay to do it sell it to one? That's where
you are allowed to sell to one. Problem is that he may sell it to another 2, and then you'll end up with the shchuna.
So then, who does it refer to?
So we're using a comparison here, just like by stumbling, you're allowed to give it to one person, even though he may end up giving it to the maaser, right? So too in this case, you're allowed to sell it to him, even though he may. The non-Jew has no prohibition of selling it to another non-Jew. That's not our issue. Our issue is that it may end up, just like by lifnei iver, we see that that's not an issue. So too over here, that's not going to be an issue. That's what Rashi learns us. Okay. Even in places where they said that you're allowed to rent, but you're not allowed to rent to them a base dira, place where they're going to live. What are you renting? I don't know, maybe an office or something. Not a base dira. And now, what's the reason for that? Mishnah said because they're going to bring their idol inside, and you don't want to give them a place to hold their idol. Well, one second. The language of the Mishnah is even in places where we said that you're allowed to rent. Who holds that you're allowed to rent? I mean, who holds that you're ever not allowed to rent? Now, Rebbe Yose always held that you're allowed to rent even in Israel. So when the Mishnah says even in places where you're not allowed to rent, that meant that even in places where you're allowed to rent, that means that there were some places where you're not allowed to. So this cannot be Rebbe Yose, because Rebbe Yose holds that you're always allowed to. So Stama to Rebbe Meir, and obviously this Mishnah follows Rebbe Meir, Rebbe Yose, because if it would be Rebbe Yose, b'chol duch mugra, you're always allowed to rent. And so therefore we have a machlekes v'achakach stam, and that's why it was significant before to say that the halacha is like Rebbe Yose, even though we have a stam Mishnah that's Rebbe Meir right afterwards. The rule is halacha. The rule follows the stam. But okay. Mishnah said you're not allowed to rent a bathhouse. Tanya was studying the Bais. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, a person is not allowed to rent a bathhouse to a non-Jew because even after it's rented, the name of it still, they still call it, Shmerel's bathhouse, even though there's a non-Jew that took over. That name doesn't go away, like the Tzivos Hashem house. Somehow that name stays. Now the problem is that and the non-Jew is going to be doing work in the bathhouse. What's the work that you do in the bathhouse? You heat it up. You have to. They would make a fire underneath the. It would be a suspended pool, bathhouses, and they would make a fire underneath. The stones on the bottom would get hot, and so anyway, they would heat it up. That's how they would heat it. You basically go into a pot, but it was a stone pot, and that would be a violation because it would look like the non-Jews are heating it for the Jew on Shabbos. Okay. Towels, and they also had issues of towels, of laundry. Yeah, the balonim are the bathhouse attendants. Yeah, they had multiple issues, but the main one was that they would heat up the water. So we say that you're not allowed to rent not allowed to rent a bathhouse to a non-Jew. You own the bathhouse, you're not allowed to rent it to the non-Jew because of what he's going to do. Well, I didn't go through this, but there's this massive Tosfos here, the page before, that says you're not allowed to rent them a house. So you're not allowed to rent a non-Jew house because they're going to bring in their idol. So how come today we do rent houses to non-Jews?
Maybe because idols are not.
That could be an answer. That's one of the things that he discusses, is idols as common today as.
This situation is brought up a lot. What if the boy agrees not to?
No, we're going to see that in a minute. It's going to come up. Yeah. There's an opinion that says that. I don't see it here, but I bet it comes into this. There's an opinion that says that the Christians today are not considered idol worshippers. Based on a Tosfos, maybe it's a Tosfos on this page. The Ramah quotes it. So it's a big leniency. Okay.
We still say you don't put their house of worship,
right?
Because it's Avodah Zarah.
Right, but that would be because of the stricter. You remember the Rambam's thing that you're allowed to daven in a mosque,
right?
The Rambam right. But I think today they say that we're not allowed to. And I'm not sure why. What's switched? But I think it's something switched.
Well, that's what we're saying.
Right. Okay. So avalakuti mai. What about to rent it to a kuti? Now a kuti is they keep Shabbos. We're talking about according to the opinion here that holds that a kuti is they're Jewish and they follow the main laws. A kuti mai, a kuti shari. We only said to an idolater. What about a kuti? The kuti, remember the kutim are this tribe of people that they were brought into Israel so that it doesn't get overtaken by wild animals, and they converted and they studied Torah. And the question is if they converted because of the wild animals, or fear of that, or if they, whatever the case is, we're following the opinion that they keep the main halachas. But the problem is, but maybe it's going to work on Cholamayit. The Kutis were not careful with Cholamayit. They were careful with Shabbos, not with Cholamayit. So maybe they're going to work on Cholamayit. Where it says Cholamayit and Nami Avdina, we also work on Cholamayit to heat the bathhouse. I mean, that type of work we're allowed to do. It's for the tzarech of of having a bath. What would be to rent the field to a non-Jew in Chutz La'aretz, right? Shari, you're allowed. You're allowed to rent a field to a non-Jew in Chutz La'aretz. My timer, but there's a problem over here. Maybe he's going to do work in the field on Shabbos. You say, no, it's not a problem, because arisa risuseka of it. When you see a non-Jew in a field on Shabbos, even if you know the field belongs to the Jew, you would assume that he's considered what goes under the category as kablanis. He's working for himself. He's an artist is a sharecropper, but the concept is that whenever he does the work, he's a contractor. He doesn't get paid by the hour. He's not getting paid for Shabbos. He can do the work whenever he wants. He can do it in the middle of the night if he wants. And what does he gain from the work that he does? He gets the produce. If he works hard, he gets more produce. That's a case where he's working for himself. He's not working for you. And everyone knows these halachas that a sharecropper can do this. Now, Rabbeinu Tam here says that based on this concept, that if someone hires this is the Taisvus, says, according to this, someone hires a Jew hires a non-Jew to build him a house, he's allowed to build it on Shabbos. Because everyone knows that he's not getting paid by the hour. It's kablanis. And if you go...
I was told on Rosh Hashanah, I remember they were doing more plans for Rosh Hashanah.
Said you have to jump, not to...
Run back and say, get out of here.
Yeah, so if you go down a little past halfway in Taisvus, it says, Ad kan shitas Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbi Yitzchak Pirs the kablanis the Bais aser. Vayadoicha kol rayas Rabbeinu Tam. All the rayas Rabbeinu Tam he knocks off. So there's a machlekes Rabbeinu Tam and Ri. How this is going to work? And I think basically that it's not a halacha share, but I think did you learn this in Halacha Shabbos? Learn the halachas of this? That if it's in the area, that's right. It's Marasayan. If it's in a Jewish area, in the town, in the tchum actually, so then you're not allowed to have him do work. You can have him begging on your roof on Shabbos. Even though everyone knows he just has to do the job, he can do it any day. It doesn't matter. You know, he's not getting paid for the hours. Not getting paid because it's Shabbos. There's leniency for Shul. Things that they take home is different. You know, things that they, a garment that they're taking home, that's a different story. They don't care when they do it. Okay, there's a problem over here of shlichus. You may be telling him to do. He's your agent, and he's doing work for you. Okay. So arisa risusi covered. Merchatz nami amri arisa risusi covered. So why are you prohibiting the bathhouse? Because he's going to be boiling the water, even if it's for you, but he does it because he could do it on Friday. He's doing it today. It says arisa de merchatz layav the enchi. We don't do it like that. Bathhouses aren't rented out as a sharecropper. The person has to get paid. If you have a worker there, then the worker gets paid by the hour, not as a sharecropper. Tanya, starting in the Bais of Shimon ben Elazar held leyasker adam sadeo lakuti. Person is not allowed to rent his field to a kuti. Exactly what we were concerned about in the first brisa. Here it says clearly that it's aser. But what about a non-Jew? It seems like you see, the first brisa was the bathhouse. Now it's a field. That's the distinction. Bathhouse was aser. The field is mutter. What would be if it would be? I'm sorry. The bathhouse was aser even to a guy. It was aser to a guy. So a kuti would be mutter, the bathhouse. Now we're saying the field is aser to a kuti and mutter to a Eved Kechavim. It flips. It would be shari, it would be mutter. Dami arisa risusa of it. He's doing just his work. Yachi akuti nami arisa risusa of it. We would say that he's just doing his work. Why are you saying that there's a problem of the kuti doing work in the field on Chol Hamoed? Remember, kuti doesn't keep Chol Hamoed. But why are we saying that there's a problem with this? We should say there's no problem. He's an artist. He can do the work whenever he wants. So he's doing it on Cholamayit, but that's not, you're not paying him to do it on Cholamayit. Gemara says, he doesn't hold of this heter. So, so then why is renting it to a non-Jew is allowed? Can do work on Shabbos. The Gemara says, no, because a non-Jew, you tell him what to do, he listens. Kuti also maybe you tell him what to do, he's going to listen. He says, no, Kuti leitzayas. Because the Kuti says, what do you mean, I'm more religious than you? I know more better than you. You don't know what you're talking about. This, I'm telling you, that's how it is.
It's being Jewish.
Yeah. It's a raya that is a yid.
Yeah.
Okay. Yachi, that's the case. Basically, what happened over here now, we just switched the whole Gemara. We were concerned that he's going to be doing work on so then there's a question over here. Question here is that so why would it be a problem to rent the merchatz to the non-Jew if you tell him not to work it on Shabbos?
Yeah, they're not chutzpah.
And they would listen. Kuti doesn't listen.
So a lot of times that you can business because taking on Shabbos. Reason
Right.
brought up a lot.
Maybe the answer is, I mean, I would love to see this inside. Someone says this, but maybe the answer is that the merchatz make money every day that it's open.
So it's an official policy.
So the field, you don't make money every day. You have a certain amount of work that you have to do. The more work you do, but he can do that work on a weekday. He can work more hours on the weekday. He can work it on Shabbat. So it's not a daily income. So you see, every time someone goes to the bathhouse, they have paid for the thing. So if it's open another day, you have more income. It's like clearly every day has an income. Maybe the problem is that the bathhouse we don't trust him because he makes more money. Over here, you tell him don't do it on Shabbat. It's okay, fine, I'll do it on Sunday. Okay, maybe that's okay. So
You have to pay an employee to just open.
yeah, just to open it, you have to do malacha. The field. Wow. Very nice, thank you.
It's going to tell.
Everything helps. If that's the case, that the kuti is not going to listen. The kuti is not going to listen. My ears shmai. Why do you say before? Why do we say that you can't rent the field to a kuti because it's called on your name? You have another issue. According to Rebbe Meir, that holds that the kuti is considered a Jew, and he's not going to listen. You can't give it to them because he's going to do malach on cholamayid. Lifnei iver. Gemara says chadavayit kamar. There's one prohibition plus another prohibition. We happen to skip one detail. That's a main detail, a very important detail of lifnei iver. And nation across al shmai also. There's another detail here is that it's going to be called by his name, by the Jew's name, and it's going to be a problem when he's going to be doing work on cholamayid. Okay.
Those are both rabbanim.
But
The two,
they do work on
the
cholamayid.
two problems.
So
Either,
that's a very interesting question.
It sounds like
No. 1 second. The lifnei iver would be a problem with deraisa, because you're not allowed to allow him to do work. Would be what work on cholamayid is a deraisa, derabbanos machlekes. But if it's a deraisa, right? So then lifnei iver would be on a deraisa, right?
No.
Yeah, the lifnei iver is for sure on a deraisa.
Oh, okay.
Question is if lifnei iver is on a derabbanon. If there's that's a discussion. Taisus over here mentions this.
The bathhouse would be allowed to work on home.
Yeah, that we said the bathhouse is allowed. Now we're talking about the field. Yeah. Machlekes here in Taisus, if work on cholamayid is a deraisa derabbanon. So it's a big machlekes. Okay. Yeah, of course. The question is if deraisa derabbanon. The Chida writes about the he has a Shema G'daylam. We have a Chida here. One of the volumes is Shema G'daylam. He writes about different sages that he met, or different people that in Jewish history. One of them is the Rebbe Yehuda. He says that Rebbe Yehuda was a great man, even though he allowed shaving on cholamayid.
Even what?
Even though he allowed shaving on cholamayid.
Nevertheless, I love him already.
Nevertheless, he's still a great man.
Oh boy. Burn it.
Love him.
Okay. Anu Merikai. There were these, it sounds like Moroccans, but it's actually people that grow saffron.
Well, what was that say for clue?
Shema G'daylim. It's right there. The 4 volumes.
Oh wow.
It's good read.
Yeah.
Reads fast.
It is a good read, actually.
Is that the same thing that's in English? It's like 3 volumes of sages.
You have an old brown book, 3 volumes of sages.
I know they're covered
With the
book covers, but book
what's
covers
the
I think are green. It's not.
It's called Our Sages.
Those are
Something
collector
like that.
Is it
editions.
written by Golden or something?
Those are collector editions. The green
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah, they are
Number
collectors. The
one,
question is if you have
Superman
a buyer. Okay. So there's people that sell saffron. The way this would work is like this. That the way they set it up is that the non-Jew is going to do his work on Shabbos. They have to take care of the garden. It needs a lot of care. So he's going to do on Shabbos, and the Jew is going to do the work on Sunday. And that's how they divided it up. You do Shabbos, I do Sunday, and they'll take care of this saffron, which is takes a lot of care to grow. Asalakami de Rabba. To Rabba Sharlu, Rabba said, yeah, that's a good arrangement. Esfer Ravina le Rabba. Ravina says, 1 second. Yisrael vayvid kichavim shekiblu sada b'shutfis. Let's say a Jew and a non-Jew, they have a partnership in a field. Lo yomi Yisrael vayvid kichavim. The Jew is not allowed to tell the non-Jew, "Tol chel kcha b'Shabbos b'chol." You take your portion on Shabbos, I'll take the weekday. Not allowed to do that. Here you're saying that you are allowed to do that. But if there was arranged originally from the very beginning, then it's mutter, then it's allowed. If just afterwards everything was with no arrangement, and afterwards they want to divide it up, then it's usher. You can't say you take Shabbos, I take weekday. You take the payments of Shabbos, and I'll take the weekday payment.
Excuse me.
So
the Maseches. I tell you about that restaurant story last night.
Yeah.
So they told me,
Open
no,
on
do not
Shabbos.
eat in Motek on the first floor in the mall next to Adventure, in the mall next to Apple Store.
Okay.
It's not kosher. I sat there with my son to order, and then couldn't find a hatchet, and we turned that. He asked, and he said it's kosher style. So be careful.
It's in Aventura Mall.
There's never been a kosher place.
Wait, so let me tell you. So the lady said to
What?
me when she said kosher style, but
Because
on
you
the
have to open
top,
on Shabbos.
wait, listen. So that's why I'm bringing this up.
Okay.
So she tells me, but on the top floor, we have it kosher. So I look it up online. It's called Ayala or something like that, and it has a mashgiach Tmidi, and it's kosher. And why do I bring
Left
it
turn,
up?
we're on
Because
left
they bring
turns.
in this. They are open on Shabbos. Their claim is because the law in the mall is that, which you just said, Moshe, is that the restaurants must be open on Saturday. So their arrangement
Left turn.
is, and it's in their
We're on a
website.
left turn.
All right. No, listen. In their website is that they have a goy partner that owns the restaurant from front. Please listen. From nobody should make this from Friday night to Sunday morning when it's open. The rest of the week is owned by the Jew. The rest of the week it's got mashgiach tmidi, but do not eat there on Shabbos, on Shabbos, etc.
But how do you know the guy doesn't go mess up?
And they hold.
How do they know the kelim are kosher?
I don't know. They said that they have cameras and this and that, and they give this whole thing on the website.
To our Zoom
how
listeners, I'm so
this,
sorry.
I'm
so sorry, guys.
According to this opinion,
So sorry about that.
it's kosher. So my warning is, don't eat on the first floor. What? Some guy from New Zealand is the Rav. If you just go
I
on
had
the
to go really far to get a.
No, if you go on the website, Motek and Aventura Mall, and then you see kosher Motek, there's a whole explanation of how the third floor one is kosher.
Everybody will be back to our
Beware.
regular programming very
Beware.
fast.
Hey, this is maaser. You could make the mistake. We almost say
Right.
in a non-kosher restaurant.
After the daf. After the
whole-
daf. After
Okay.
the daf. We tell everybody this.
No, everyone will go out and then Chas v'Shalom make a mistake going in the
Send it
trade
by
restaurant.
WhatsApp. Tell everybody
It was
by
worth it making, for the 5 of us here, it was worth it making. And if not, take it up with my lawyer, which is you.
WhatsApp. Always hot.
Ravina asked Rava the question: how could Rava allow them to exchange days for work? We have a Bais that says you're not allowed to do that unless it was made up originally. So Rava got embarrassed. At the end, it turns out that it was actually arranged originally. So there was no reason for Rava to be embarrassed. Rava passed him correctly. Okay. Have a Rav Gvia Mikara Hava. It's a period after Hava. Rav Gvia Mibeksil. This is Rav Gvia. He Amar Hanu Shasili de Erla Hava.
What's been big?
That's a place. That's the name of a city. It would have to have been done originally, made up that it would have to entirely be redone. Well, in Rivim Beksil Amar Hanush Sili Dar Lahaver. Not, it wasn't a case of saffron that was being worked on Shabbos. But here we have a different issue. Issue is that the plants were Arla plants. Arla, the first 3 years of fruit trees. David Kechavim ate for 3 years. Yisrael Shnei Da'atera, and Yisrael ate 3 years after that. That's quite an arrangement. We have to wait 3 years to start. Asalakami de Rava, they came to Rava Sharla. Rava said that's allowed. But Ravina asked Rava a question, and the question was that when it comes to Shabbos, you're not allowed. It was, why do you ask him a question about Shabbos if the whole issue was Rava? The whole issue was Arla? So the Gemara says. No, he was showing him that there's only an issue of Shabbos and there's no issue of Arla, and he's actually bringing a proof for him. And the fact that it says that if they made up originally that it's okay, if they made up originally, then it would be permissible. That tells me that you can do this for Arla. There's no problem of Hana that's coming from the weekday that's exchanged for Shabbos. So too, there's no hana from the 3 years after Arla from that. But Ichsif, so then why was Rav embarrassed if Ravina was bringing a proof? Gemara says, he was never embarrassed. Okay, I guess that's something that's debatable if someone looks embarrassed in it. Let's say nothing was made up. And what they want to do is afterwards they want to say, it turned out that the non-Jew did the work on Shabbos and Jew did the work on the weekday, but it wasn't made up like this. So Tashima, come and listen. If it was made up originally, then it's mutter hastama, but if that wasn't the arrangement, then it's also sounds like a proof. A maseifa, but if you go further, it says in Bo L'Cheshbon, if at the end they decided to divide it like that, then it's going to be Aser, Hastama. But if it was not, but if it was nothing was arranged, then that sounds like it's mutter. It's only because at the end. Well, the Gemara says you can't learn this way or that way from this piece. Okay, now yeah, this is an important piece. There's a lot of, you see what's going on in Taisvos. Let's leave the new parak. Do we want to learn tonight? We'll learn an parak tonight. Huh? Thursday night. Well, we'll do we'll try to do an Amud tonight. Learn. All right. We can start if you want after Myra. That may be easier, even though the call starts at 8:30.
Sorry you were delayed for 15 minutes today with the story about the restaurant.
That's what we'll do is.
Does
that make sense?
Yes.
That would make sense.
Yes.
That way you can have Myra. You don't have to wait for the later Myra.
I sent you on the regular text.
Okay. Have a good day.
You take